Hey everyone, before we get started, just a bit of the boring stuff. The information contained on this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal situation. You should consider whether the information is appropriate to your needs and, where appropriate, seek professional advice from a financial advisor. Now on with the episode.
If you can make your offers appealing as possible in terms of be talking to your broker, if you're in a position to not have to go subject to finance, obviously only if your broker says so. Get someone to come out and have a look at the property before you're actually making an offer as well, so you can be in a position to make an unconditional offer, because it's going to definitely set you different than the other offers in a sense. But yeah, just be competitive.
Hi, I'm Joe. I bought a house, and despite my experience in real estate, I still had a shitty experience. Apparently I'm not alone, so I've gathered the funniest and realest experts to teach Australia a better way to find their home. Welcome to the No BS Real Estate Podcast. Welcome back again, everyone. I'm Joe, and today on the No BS Real Estate Podcast, we have Michelle Stevens from O'Brien's Real Estate in Carrum Downs. And in this episode, we'll be talking about finding your home. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here, and I'm keen to get into your tips, advice and words of wisdom on the process for buying an established home. Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been a licensed agent for 11 years. You've won 4 awards in 2020 for top agent list and sell units and GCI, which is gross commission income. And just this year, you've bagged 2 big awards. So the REB's Top 50 Women in Real Estate, and you've been named the REIA's Residential Salesperson of the Year. Massive congratulations. What a phenomenal way to be recognised.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
And when I spoke to your assistant, she mentioned all your crazy long work hours, and I'm so appreciative to have an agent of your caliber here on the show today. What do you think the secret to your success is?
Look, you're just going to be there when people need you. So it's not a 9-to-5 job. I think a lot of people maybe kind of get into real estate for the wrong reasons. They see the glamorous lifestyle that you might see on television and everything, but it's definitely not that. So it's lots of long hours. Helping your vendors move to the next chapter of their lives with as much money in their pockets as possible. So you give it your all.
I think you're dead on with the perception of the reality shows and things like that, the glamorous lifestyle. It's definitely appealing, but all the long work hours, no one really sees what goes on behind closed doors.
100%. There's so much involved in every transaction. So to obviously get someone from point A to the end result with that sold sticker on the board and then the moving truck and moving on to the next chapter. But there's so many things in between to make sure we can get them the very best possible result in the shortest time frame possible.
That leads me to, when you have time to relax, if you do, how do you like to spend your time off?
The hard thing is obviously, work really kind of takes up a majority of my time. But look, I love, spending time with family and friends. My husband actually works with me full time as well, which is really handy. So at least I get to see him. Otherwise, I would never see him. But yeah, I love going out for dinner and things like that. So yeah, just your normal stuff.
That's a big leg up, having your husband work alongside you. At least he understands the hours and that misunderstanding of why aren't you home yet?
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you 12-hour days most days and everything like that. So I would never see him. So.
Look, let's get into it. So we have you on the show today to help our listeners better understand the process of buying an established home. So agents sometimes don't have the best reputation, and it's not the case when you've found a great agent that can help you on the journey. So we just want to sort of go through, when you're buying a home, what is the role of the real estate agent, apart from obviously showing you the property and signing contracts, because there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, so look, obviously at the end of the day, as an agent, we are employed by our vendors to get them the best possible result. So, obviously we are there to, help both parties move from the start to the finish. But at the end of the day, we are employed by our vendors. People can kind of sometimes maybe get those lines a bit blurred, but they shouldn't, because our vendors are, obviously the buyers are our clients as well, but our vendors are our main priority at the end of the day to get them the best result possible. So for a buyer, obviously at the end of the day, it is quite a strong market at the moment, which is pretty difficult. So I know a lot of people that might be making offers on properties that they've made offers on 3, 4, 5 houses and they keep missing out just because it is such a competitive market. It's really good to kind of have your ducks in a row. Like if you can make your offers appealing as possible in terms of be talking to your broker if you're in a position to not have to go subject to finance, obviously only if your broker says so, or get someone to come out and have a look at the property before you're actually making an offer as well, so you can be in a position to make an unconditional offer, because it's going to definitely set you different than the other offers. But yeah, just be competitive. But yeah, our job is to obviously get the best result for the owners and transition everyone through to that move-in day.
Like you mentioned, the market is doing a lot of different things at the moment in terms of the balance of, demand and supply. It's all out of whack. You've got a lot of buyers out there. And do you generally, when you've sort of met a buyer, talk them through the process of the things you've mentioned, like those sort of, how to put, when you put in an offer, the things they should be looking out for, or not necessarily?
Yeah, the hard thing is every agent does work differently. So it's kind of not like there's no right or wrong answer to that in a sense. I think it's very important to find out if you like the home, how that agent is going to be presenting the offers to the vendors. Like, is it best and final offer? Is it multiple offer situation? Is it just yourself and the owner that's going to be negotiating? Or, are they going to effectively kind of disclose offers and things like that? So I think it's very important to understand which way, every different property is different. Every agent does work differently, but just to find out how their offer is going to be put forward to the vendors to obviously put themselves in the very best possible light to get, their offer accepted.
Because, that's something that, we don't often ask or know to ask when you're buying, and it changes everything in terms of your approach. And when you first meet a client, either from the online inquiries or the open itself, what advice would you give to people out there that are trying to find the right home?
Oh, look, put yourself in front of agents. There is definitely off-market opportunities and everything like that. You really want to make yourself known and be able to tell an agent, what you are looking for, your budget. Don't necessarily, I know a lot of people don't want to kind of lay all their cards out on the table, but they might be ideally wanting to spend $800, but if it's the one that ticks all the boxes, they might go $850. You need to let the agent know that yes, you could extend to $850 if something perfect comes up, because you want to be getting notifications of things that are coming up that, if we only think you can spend up to $800, you might not be getting notifications for something that might be in that mid-800s realm. So for off-market opportunities. So be honest, be straightforward with us as well. And let us know exactly where you sit in a sense. So, I know a lot of people say don't let the agents know everything, but it means a lot better for us if we're going to be in a better position to be able to help you move to that next chapter and buy that dream home if you are open and honest with us.
Yeah, 100%. You guys are the experts. You're doing it day in and day out. So you know exactly how to help people get from that step A to B. So I couldn't agree with you more there in that regard. And, I've had a few people sort of explain this to me in my own interviews and saying, sometimes agents will show you, properties that are way out of your price range. And it makes sense now that you're saying it in this light. Like, if the perfect house came up and it ticked all your boxes, and would you be willing, or can you pay $850,000 versus your $800?
Yeah, 100%. There's no point looking at something obviously that is outside the price range, but everyone's got that kind of want to spend price and can spend price. We're better off knowing you can spend price versus you want to spend price.
Yep, that's good advice. I like that. So if we move a little further down the process now, and let's say a buyer who's come to the open, loves the home and wants to put in an offer, what's the general process around this? Because I think there's a little bit of blurriness in terms of things they can ask for, like your, fittings and fixtures, if they need to put down a deposit and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, look, obviously every office is different and everyone's got different circumstances. So once again, there's no right or wrong. Yes, your standard is your 10% deposit, your 30, 60, 90, 120-day settlement. But some people need to be, they've got guarantors if they're first home buyers and they need to be paying deposits by way of deposit bonds. Or some people might have smaller deposits like, a 3.5% deposit. Yes, it's not your normal, but obviously as an agent, I'm here to take all my vendors, every offer, and present them in the light in which we see them. So, yes, I have to obviously let my vendors know of, different risks involved with smaller deposits and things like that. But in saying that, I've never seen anything go wrong. So, you've got to put forward, obviously, if you have a 10% deposit, put it forward versus, I know some brokers say just put a 5% deposit forward. Like, you won't look as strong in your finance. So if you've got the 10% deposit, put it forward. But at the end of the day, it is your offer, and we do work out the terms which do suit you. And it comes down to the vendor if it suits them and they can move forward to saying yes to your offer.
Yeah, right. And with in terms of deposits, do you need to put that down with your offer straight, like your 10% straight away when you do your first offer? Or is that generally a smaller deposit amount?
Yeah, normally smaller deposit amounts. Also, once again, it's a very generalised question, because if you're bidding an auction, for example, yes, it will usually be like if the terms are a 10% deposit on auction day, you would do your 10% deposit on auction day. However, normal processes would be is we would take a smaller deposit when you have put forward an offer, okay, and then we would take your 5 or 10% deposit once it becomes unconditional. So if it's a subject to finance clause of 2 weeks, once it becomes unconditional, we would then take your 10% deposit. But it usually is once it becomes unconditional. As I said, every agent does work different. If you're going more up the line and it is more of a heavy auction area, majority of the properties are unconditional offers. So yes, usually you would then be going in with a 10% deposit, being ready to pay it on the day you are successful.
Key note there is that every agent is different, every area is different. And I know that can also vary for some cooling off periods. I know some suburbs do 3 days and then some do 14. Is that still what sort of happens in?
No. So there is a 3-day cooling off period on every sale that occurs in Victoria, unless it is an auction. So if it's an auction, it is an unconditional sale with no cooling off period 3 days prior to the auction and 3 days after the auction. So you are buying 100% unconditionally. If it is a private treaty, you will always have a 3 business day cooling off period. Even if you are subject to finance and everything like that, you still do have that 3-day cooling off period as well. But if it is an auction, there is no cooling off period.
And with private treaties, can you explain that just a little bit for everyone listening?
Yeah, so a private sale isn't an auction. So if it's an auction, that is unconditional on auction day. However, if it's a private treaty, so it's not like subject, like it's not a fixed date sale or anything. It is, you can effectively buy it. You see a house today, you can buy it today, but it's a private sale. So you can put forward the conditions that you need. So whether you need to be subject to finance, whether you need a building and pest inspection, whether you need a subject to sale, at the end of the day, you can put forward the terms in which you need to be able to buy that home. That's why I say before is, you're best off kind of putting yourself in the best possible light if you can have an unconditional offer, so not subject to finance and not subject to building and pest inspection. It is a much stronger offer, because once the 3-day cooling off period's done, that house is unconditional versus someone having to wait 14 days and potentially finance extensions and things like that. So an unconditional offer is always more appealing.
Of course, and that sort of leads me to my next question with building and pest inspections, because that's often something that comes up with, a lot of people putting in offers. They'd like to get the building and pest inspection done. And what sort of happens in that situation if it were to fail? Is that what happens to the property and the sale in that regard? Do you?
Yeah, so if you've put a subject to a building and pest inspection, we do have the standard building and pest inspection clauses which are in the REIV contracts, just so there is no grey area in a sense. So it is a major structural defect which the registered building and pest inspector that you've employed to inspect the property for you will obviously make notes in their report to you. So if there is major structural defects and the building and pest inspector recommends that we do fail the property based on the building and pest inspection as per their findings, well, then you would go back to your conveyancer and then they would effectively terminate the contract. Because you have made an offer subject to a building and pest inspection, it's the same as a finance. You would get that initial deposit back because you've made it as a condition on the sale.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So if it wasn't on there and you got it done, that wouldn't be something you can obviously hold to the contract if your finance goes through.
Yeah, but you wouldn't make it subject. You wouldn't get a building and pest inspection done if you weren't making it subject to. Like if you wanted one, you'd make it subject to.
Yeah,
some people get building test inspections done before they make offers. That's more if it's like an auction, because they're buying unconditionally on auction day. So they're wanting to go in there with as much information as possible so they can bid confidently and knowing exactly what they might need to spend to get the house up to their standards.
And I know this might sort of be, in the sense, like, not the right process, but if someone, you know how you were saying earlier, getting prepared as much as you can before your offer, you know, and getting all your ducks in a row before you place one, you know, your offer in. If you wanted to get a building and pest inspection done before you place an offer, is that something that people can do? Or not really? It's mainly when you go to put in your offer.
Yeah, no, 100%. So some people will ask to do a building and pest inspection prior, but in saying that, if it's a private sale, they would make it subject to, because you're going to be spending, $700-800 to get a building and pest inspection done when you don't know if your offer is going to be accepted. So you're best off making it subject to. But if it's an auction, obviously you've got to do it prior and you've got to invest that money to get it done because of the fact that because of the fact that you would be buying unconditionally on that day. There are some agents that have things like buy before you bid, in a sense. So they might have building and pest inspections available that you can read over. Some owners will actually get them done. If it is an auction and things like that. So people aren't, they can feel like they can read over the building and pest inspection and feel comfortable that they are buying a really good product.
And makes sense, totally doing the building and pest as a subject to clause rather than beforehand, because you may not get the offer, or you run the risk of someone else purchasing as well.
Yeah, 100%. And then you're going and outlaying all this money when and you haven't been accepted.
100%. And that sort of leads me to the negotiation process. So what happens when the vendor, doesn't accept the first offer that someone puts down?
Okay, so that's more like if it's the thing is that's more like if it's obviously one offer, like if it's not a multiple offer situation. If it is just single negotiations with the vendor and the buyer, if we've just got the one offer, they might make an offer, we'll talk to the owners, we'll come back with a counter offer, and then we go back and forth to see if we can get to a price point that everyone's happy with.
And is that all done in writing, or is it just sort of verbal communication and you're doing a lot of the running around?
Yeah, once again, it comes down to an agent. Some agents, some buyers will buy a property and it's not even on a contract of sale. I do like to put everything down in writing so the vendor knows what they're saying yes or no to, and the buyer also knows exactly where they sit as well. So usually it is done in writing, but once again, it does work differently. Every agent operates differently as well. But it is best practice to do everything in writing.
In this climate, have you seen that a lot more than your single offer situations?
100%. Yeah, 100%. So majority properties at the moment, they are all having multiple offers on them, a lot of them, especially the popular ones and more kind of that entry point first home buyer markets where we might have, 3, 4, 5, 6 offers on the table, and every offer is different. So it comes down to what the vendor's ideally after at the end of the day. It's always good to find out, like what kind of settlement terms the owner's after as well. So you might have the most appealing offer price-wise, but, your terms of settlement periods might not suit the owner. So you're always best to kind of, see if you can work with them to see what they're after, because it would put your offer in the best possible light as well. So, but yeah, look, we do still get the properties that, are a single offer, which is obviously great for buyers. So you can, have sole negotiations with the vendor.
Yeah, right. No, and that makes complete sense. So that's good to know. And, when you are doing your offer, like what are some of the conditions on contracts that make your offer stronger if there's another buyer that's competing against you for the house, like you've sort of mentioned? Is that like a bigger pre-approval, or even just having unconditional would be your edge?
Yes, ideally, if you can say, you can do a 10% deposit. But as I said earlier, being that unconditional offer is always going to put you in the best possible light. So, for example, if we've got someone at, let's say, a house, it's on the market and we've got both offers are, acceptable prices for the owner. We've got one at $750 that's unconditional, or we've got one at $755, but it's subject to finance and subject to a building and pest inspection and potentially a smaller deposit. Obviously, every owner is different, but 9 times out of 10, you'd see the owner go for the $750, which is an unconditional offer, over the $755. Yes, it's $5,000 more, but at the end of the day, to know that it's done and dusted and they can move on to the next chapter and you can feel confident, well, majority of people would go the one that is slightly less for the unconditional offer.
That's awesome to know that, because I think everyone thinks, oh, no, I'll do it all subject and I'll just bump up my price, that I can offer on the property, and it doesn't always win them the property at the end of the day.
Once again, every owner is different. I'll see some people will take $1,000 more with subject to finance because they want the $1,000. But we've got to say, look, at the end of the day, obviously it comes down to their decision. But I usually say an unconditional offer is worth $10,000 in your pocket.
Yeah, nice. That's good to know. And, if we're moving away from like your contracts and stuff, the next step is obviously, the vendor does accept the offer, whoever's it is, if it's multiple offers and it's happy days for the buyers and they've won the house. What should buyers do next? And what does the agent do in this period to make it all happen until settlement?
Yeah, so what we'll have is, if someone's subject to finance, obviously we've got the under contract sitting on the property until it becomes unconditional. Our first, once you've purchased a property, the first questions are, do you have a conveyancer? If they don't have a conveyancer, obviously we can get someone to give them a call. Do they need a building and pest inspector to give them a call if they are subject to that as well? And obviously sending them through, obviously, all the details for their initial deposit. Once it becomes unconditional, we wait forward to that last 7 days prior to settlement for the final inspection.
Yeah, awesome. And I think that's one of the things that, we don't see from the agent perspective either, that, in that time when you are signing a contract, it's all done. There's a period of time that we sort of wait for, depending on how long your settlement period is, 3 months, 2 months or 1 month. So it's good to...
I sometimes feel like that period actually drags along because you just want to get into your new home.
Yeah, definitely. And with settlement periods, I know that's sort of dependent on each person and their personal circumstances. But is there anything that's sort of more attractive on your offer as well, like a shorter period, or not necessarily? It's dependent on like your vendors.
Like if someone's purchased and they're, wanting to move into state and things like that, yes, a 30-day settlement might suit, or if it's an empty property, a quick settlement. But if it's a family living in a home and they haven't purchased yet, majority of the time they'll actually want a longer settlement. So it gives them enough time to go out there, start looking and finding that right property that ticks the boxes for them as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's good to note. And if we jump to the final inspection, what happens on this day and what should buyers look out for when inspecting their home before handover?
Yeah, just pretty much making sure it's in the same condition as when they bought it. Making sure your appliances work and everything like that as per when you purchased the property as well. And just making sure it's, in a neat and tidy fashion. So unfortunately, Victorian legislation is a little bit different with your tenanted properties versus buying properties. When something's tenanted, they have to steam clean carpets and obviously get it cleaned and things like that. When you are actually purchasing, it does come down to common courtesy and the way the property is left. So we will have some people, So like a lot of the time, people do leave it really nice and neat and tidy and everything like that. But we do get the occasion where, it hasn't been presented in the best possible light, which is a little bit frustrating. But yeah, as I said, there isn't unfortunately really any repercussions of that, because everyone's got a different idea of something that's nice and clean and tidy, if you know what I mean. So
yeah, of course.
Just trying to make sure it's in as clean and neat and tidy position as possible at the final inspection, and also always be relaying things to your conveyancer as well. So once you've done your final inspection, have a good chat to your conveyancer and they'll be able to advise you accordingly as well.
And on that point, could you put that as a clause in your contract potentially to say house cleaned before handover?
At the end of the day, that is your offer, but you've also got to be keeping in mind that if someone's got a same-day settlement, they've got the truck there. The settlement might be of the home you've bought at 12 o'clock and then their house is settling at 12:30. So they're packing their stuff up and then putting it in a truck and then going. So, they might turn around and go, look, there's just no way we can get it professionally cleaned before we move out. So you don't want it to be a deal breaker of, what might cost you $300 to get a cleaner in there to give it a clean for. You don't want to potentially lose a home over that as well. So especially in this market, which is very competitive, if you can try and leave any kind of conditions off like that, yes, that's ideal. When the market inevitably does tighten, because no good market lasts forever, you can be a little bit more picky with the conditions you do put in there.
Yeah, and that's really good to note. And I think just this climate at the moment, it's so competitive and so much is happening out there for you guys. Like, you all run off your feet with offers and things like that for, purchases. So yeah, it makes complete sense.
Pretty crazy market. So yeah.
Yeah, like I know for myself, I had this experience when I was an agent. I did a final inspection with, my clients, and we arrived there at night time and they brought like 20 people to the property with them. And when we'd gone through the owner had actually gone and taken out all the light globes, all the fittings and fixtures were gone, everything. They took everything, and it was a nightmare to fix at the end of the day with the vendor. What would happen in that sort of scenario today? Because that was quite a while ago for me.
Yeah, so look, obviously you'd talk to your conveyancer. If all fixtures and fittings are included in every contract unless it's specified in the contract of sale to start with. But it's also the agent communicating with the vendors as well, like at time of listing the property. So is there anything in particular that is effectively nailed down that you wanted to take? Well, yes, oh my God, my drapes, I sewed them myself. I love them. So we would exclude that from the contract of sale and make the buyers aware of that at the time of them purchasing as well. So it would be effectively, as a special condition, they would be removing them. So it is, making sure at the very start, having really good conversations with your vendors around if there's anything in particular that they are planning on taking and what is required of them to leave at the property as well. So it's all communication. If you communicate properly with from start to finish, there won't be any hiccups like that on sort of final inspection day.
No, that's really good to know. Awesome. And, I would have loved that back then if I didn't have to run around so much. I think I was quite new to the game and I knew I made a lot of mistakes. I'm like, oh gosh, I've stuffed up.
Yeah. And they've just always got to have a good conveyancer as well to be able to relay things back to.
Yeah, definitely. And then the day finally arrives for the new owners to move in, and it's generally, popping the champers and celebrating this massive milestone. What should the new owners expect on settlement?
So pretty much if you've told settlement, settlement's happening at 2:00, we can't automatically release the keys at 2 p.m. We have to get confirmation that settlement has taken place. So look, it might take as little as 20 minutes for us to get notified that they're in a position to come in and pick up the keys, but it can take up to an hour. It is all done electronically now through PEXA anyway, so it is a lot quicker for us to get notified. But yeah, just wait for that confirmation from your conveyancer that the settlement has officially taken place, and then they can head on down, because it's the same with anything. There can always be little hiccups and everything, which can delay settlements. So you don't kind of want to have the truck packed and ready and waiting and settlement's been delayed an hour or something like that. So you're always best off waiting for the conveyancer to make that call to say, yes, it's all settled, and you feel free to head on down to pick up your keys.
Yeah, awesome. I know that some agents like to do a few things, for their clients on the big day. Do you generally do anything special for your clients to help them celebrate when it is move-in day?
Yes, look, we give everyone a little pack and everything. So just as like a little, giving congratulations, some champagne and little things like that. So we always mix it up, and our packs are always a little bit different. But yeah, just something to celebrate their purchase and everything. So obviously, I think the biggest excitement that you can give someone is the keys, effectively.
100%, that would be the best part, I think, picking up your keys after all the blood, sweat and tears into, moving yourself out, finding a property you like and moving in.
Yeah, 100%.
And my last question here is there any advice you'd sort of give to your home buyer market at the moment?
So the home buyer market at the moment, just as I said earlier, that I just think it's really important to make sure that you're being open and honest and transparent with the agents to let them know kind of where you sit, any special requirements you are needing with settlement periods and things like that. So we can definitely try and help transition you into the correct house for you.
Michelle, this has been so valuable. Thank you once again for being here. And I'm sure our listeners are feeling much better prepared when they start searching for their dream home. And how can our listeners reach out to you if they wanted to engage your services?
It's always best to get me on my mobile. So you can effectively Google me. My name's Michelle Stevens from O'Brien Real Estate in Carrum Downs. And yeah, my best contact phone number is 0417 352 644. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for having me on board today, guys.
Oh, of course. Fantastic. And guys, that wraps up today's episode of the No BS Real Estate Podcast. We'll be updating our blog with this week's episode details and key points so you can better prepare for your journey into the market. Head to www.bodhi.com.au and download the checklist. And thank you once again, Michelle. I'll put in her details in our blog as well so you can reach out to her and engage her services. Thanks again.
Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to finish up by acknowledging that there are good and bad people in every industry. I was a real estate agent for several years and I've met some wonderful and amazing people that I'm still friends with to this day. So shout out to the hardworking agents that get a bad name because of a few bad apples. You've been listening to the No BS Real Estate Podcast. Did you know we're building a home buyers community to give Australians a better way to find their humble abode? Sign up now and we'll send your first home buyers checklist straight to your inbox by visiting www.abodi.com.au so you can say buying your home was the easiest thing you've ever done. Thanks for listening.